Hello, welcome to Fireside Frith, the podcast brought to you by the Asatru Community. Together, we'll inspire inclusivity, share wisdom, and strengthen the bonds of our Norse pagan community. Join me as I explore topics like holy days and creative ways to celebrate. Whether you're a solo practitioner or part of a group, leadership within our faith and communities, and the mythology and history that guide our spiritual paths. Along the way, my guests and I will share stories, traditions, and insights and do our best to answer any community questions, all with the goal of inspiring the Asatru community and beyond. All right, I am incredibly excited to welcome today's special guest. He is someone who brings a wealth of talent and experience and holds a very personal connection to me. Joining us is a dedicated service member, a skilled leather worker, and a costume creator for Hot Iron Forge, my husband, Zach. He's recently begun his own journey by assisting with ritual facilitation in our local group. I'm thrilled to have him here as we explore the history and modern celebration of Disting together. Welcome to the show.
Hello, I am excited to be here.
So we were researching this subject together because, I asked him to be a guest a few weeks ago. I know you did some research on your own, some research with me. What do you know about Norse pagan spring festivals?
I know that they're pretty well connected and they all happen kind of around the same time of the year.
Well, that's great. Yeah, the spring festivals all kind of go around the equinox. That's like the midpoint between winter and summer. Today, we are talking about Disting. But that doesn't go without mentioning some other celebrations. Many pagans today celebrate Imbolc, which is originally a Gaelic or Celtic spring festival. It is commonly revered as a woman's holiday in Wicca, but other pagan groups also celebrate it. Are you ready to get into it?
I am ready.
Disting is significant in modern Norse traditions because it's a festival marking the closure of winter. It was about being thankful our ancestors made it through harsh winters and planning for the future. From all my sources that I will list at the end of the show, I found so many different deities associated with Disting that we can only assume that it differed among tribes. Before we get into this summary I'm going to have Zach read, I just want to say that the pronunciations are iffy because we don't speak these languages. We're doing the best we can, so bear with us. Zach, would you like to read the summary of what Disting is from the Troth?
I will do my best. The medieval Swedish law code, Uppsalag, describes the Disting as a legal assembly and market, adding that the piece of Disting, Disathinks Frithir, had to be kept during the assembly. A flat-top mound at Gamla Uppsala is still called Tingshaug, and might have been the site of the assembly.
Thank you for reading that. As we know, the Norse people were an agricultural society, and we can't really pinpoint the exact date when Disting went down. The sources say it's roughly the second moon after the winter solstice, and that was kind of confusing. I honestly can't remember which source had the exact quote, but like I said, I'll list all my sources at the end if you want to take a look, because it was really confusing. They kind of circled back and said it was like the second moon after the sixth day of the first moon after. It was really confusing. Moving right along. It's roughly the second moon after the winter solstice, which is approximately between modern-day February 15th and March 15th. Today, Disting follows the Christian holiday Candlemas, which, just for reference so people know what it is, Candlemas celebrates the presentation of baby Jesus at 40 days old, which is a really interesting ritual I looked up for this. It involves animal sacrifice because it was like a really old holiday. They don't celebrate it the same way anymore, obviously. Anywho, today, both Candlemas and Disting are celebrated generally on February 2nd. We know it is a festival and a market, but the sources don't really mention any Disir. If we break down the word Disting, we have thing, which is an assembly for legal matters, as the quote Zach read states, sometimes marriages, trade, market, religious rituals, and gatherings. And dis, meaning Disir. Being a large thing and starting the word with dis, it kind of suggests that there is some sort of disablot. like at Winter Nights or Mother's Night at Yule. Like many pagan practices, it would vary among different locations and cultures. After the spread of Christianity, the market gathering still took place and still takes place to this day during Candlemas.
Disting is a Swedish gathering in Uppsala, where all Swedes were required to attend. If they were Christian, they had to pay dues to not participate. According to Adam of Bremen, a German scholar, and the Heimskringla, there was a great ritual that took place. These sources vary slightly, but what we've gathered is that there were three main gods the Swedes at the time would give offerings to in Uppsala: animal and human sacrifice, and a gift exchange between loved ones. I didn't read anything in the sources that there was a Acerbot. However, that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Remember, this isn't a singular right way to do this, and we've lost a lot to history.
But the three gods had these, I'm not sure if it was like a statue or if it was like a shrine. I'm sure the translations probably changed over time. So anyway, there was some sort of statue of some sort or shrine to Thor, Odin, and Freyr. And this is in Uppsala. So Thor, they would give offerings of libations if there was threat of famine or plague, and if they were in war or going to war, they would offer libations to Odin. And then the same thing to Freyr if there were to be marriages at Uppsala. And hey, if all three were going down, all three got things. So there was that. Some of the sources were saying, and when I say the sources, I don't mean my sources for this episode. I mean the ones from scholars in around the year 1000, like Adam of Bremen and some of the other ones. And those sources are available online. However, I don't speak Latin, so I had to take those from translations. So some of these scholars at the time, or chroniclers, they have differing stories, and it is a little confusing. This is what I got from it. They sacrificed 9 of every living thing. So if you had goats, horses, pigs, chickens, what have you, they had 9 of every living thing, and they sacrificed each of those every day plus a man. All of those things they sacrificed were male animals. My understanding is that it's like on day 1 you sacrifice 9 chickens and a dude, and then the next day maybe 9 pigs and then a dude. It was kind of confusing because they also did the math that was like totaling in 72 sacrifices, which doesn't really make sense because this happened for 9 days, and so 9 times 9 is more than 72. Anyway, like I said, translations and things might have been messed with a little bit over time. So we just have to take this with a grain of salt. So anyway, they hung these sacrifices near the temple, and it's suggested that blood was collected to put in the fields. What do you think of that?
I think it's something that we probably shouldn't do today, especially the sacrificing of dudes.
I agree. I'm pretty sure that's illegal.
Pretty illegal.
My thought is you can buy fertilizer for your gardens that have bones in it, and you can buy blood meal for your plants, and it's supposed to have like a lot of nutrients. That makes sense because they didn't have Lowe's and Home Depot where you can just go buy fertilizer. You know what I mean?
Right. And as I understand it, this might just be a modern interpretation of how to implement these rituals.
Mm-hmm.
But they would collect the blood and they would do it on a small portion as their sacrifice on the field, not necessarily the entire field.
That would make sense. Half of the things I've read have been blogs of either people who research this a lot or from scholars who have interpreted the Latin or whatever, and the blood was collected specifically for fields that weren't yielding growth. They needed more fertilizer type of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. All right, and the last thing historically that we recovered from the sources is that it was also a time to give gifts to your loved ones, specifically someone that you're trying to marry or something like that. Like a Valentine, except this is before that was a thing. So that's cool.
Which source was it that was talking about the men who wanted wives going and digging a hole, and if they didn't find their loved one before they finished digging a hole, they were destined to be lonely?
I know the source will be listed. I can't remember, but yeah, it was like if your loved one comes and talks to you while you're digging a hole, then you'll get to marry them. But if they don't, then you're gonna die alone.
Oh, I just imagine like a matchmaking thing, like all the dudes are in a line digging a hole and like all the women are over there and they're deciding which guy they want to go talk to save his loneliness.
Yeah, well, my thought too is like, okay, so say you and I live in a communal society and then it's around the springtime and you go out there and you're digging a hole and then someone's like, Zach's digging a hole. Are you gonna go talk to him? I mean, I guess so. Give him a cake or something. You know? And then you'd be like, oh, hey, I'm gonna marry this girl. And then boom, we'll get married.
Heck yeah. As long as you don't sacrifice me for the fields.
No, that's a little outdated. Moving right along. Some of the traditional practices were the sacrifices for peace and victory to the king. The markets, the large feasts, and the king acting as a high priest to start the rituals by riding his horse around the temple as if setting a boundary. All of this was directly connected to agricultural cycles and the preparation for planting in the spring. Before we switch to the next section, I wanted to say that Disting is very much a Swedish event. Not to say other Norse countries didn't have their own traditions at this time.
It seems like there's multiple rituals that happen around the same time of the year, and they all get celebrated either in Wicca or Norse paganism or others. And at least when I was first hearing about it, I was like, holy crap, this is confusing. Like, there's 3 words for the same thing.
Yeah. Well, what does set this specific ritual or gathering apart is that Disting was for Swedish people. Every Swede was required to go to this, to the point that even the ones that did convert to Christianity, they had to send money so that they didn't have to go. So this was very much a Swedish ritual. But in modern day paganism, I wouldn't say every pagan group or every Norse pagan group does this, but there's certain things that we get from Disting. Not the human sacrifice, not the animal sacrifice. We'll get into that later. But there's stuff that has value that I think we can take away from it. But what did you have to say?
So the part that I really got confused about was Acerbot and Disting, because like they happened very close to each other geologically and similar cultures, but they were 2 separate things.
I wouldn't say separate cultures, because at Disting you can do a Acerbot.
Right, I'm not saying there wasn't any cross rituals that happened. Just like today, someone can visit the Middle East, come back, and still practice those things here.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of cross-culturalism that comes along, but for symbolism, just separating the 2. But Disting, it sounded like it was like a cultural meeting hall.
Yes.
Where they would meet up to discuss the new year and settle whatever disputes they had for them.
Exactly. So that's what I meant earlier when I said it was an assembly.
Yeah, but like along with that, there was ritual, or likely to be ritual.
Yes. So what we know from the text is that there definitely was sacrifice, feasting, libations, big party. It was basically a big party. They did have the market, so you had people coming to trade and coming to sell their goods. All of that took place, and some of it still takes place today. It's just more I don't know if secular is the correct word, but they've taken the ritual and the religion out of it. The only thing that stays religious is that they have kind of moved to happen alongside Candlemas. So there's the Candlemas celebration, and then they have this market. But if you think about it, towns, cities, both rural and big cities alike, they do farmers markets as often as possible.
Yeah,
it's like a community event.
Like then and now, it was always a market, kind of like how you would expect a farmer's market to be. And from what it seems like nowadays, Sweden is pretty primarily Christian, but like you said, they took the religion out of it, and it goes alongside Candlemas, but it is still like a gigantic party with lots of vendors.
Yeah, exactly. Going back to the script, there is other things that can be celebrated alongside Disting that other Nordic adjacent and Nordic countries possibly and probably celebrated during this time, because it makes sense to have some sort of offering welcoming the blessings from the gods to help the agricultural season.
Coming from Scandinavia and Sweden, we're going down the North Sea and we're going to Britannia. This celebration is called Acerbot, or field remedy. It was an Anglo-Saxon charm or ritual that lasted a whole day to supernaturally fix the fields that weren't producing well.
The next one is charming of the Plough. It comes from Germanic tribes and it takes place in the month, generally February. They called it Solnad, meaning mud month, which refers to when they plowed the fields. In this tradition, offerings of cake were given to the land, and they decorated and blessed a plow before using it in the fields.
Plough Monday is an English agricultural event anointing earth from each corner of your land, the trees on the land, and the plants, praying over it, then putting it back while saying another prayer, then plowing fields, honoring the earth.
Imbolc is a Celtic tradition, probably the most popular equinox tradition amongst Western pagans, associated with the breeding cycle of sheep and the purification feast. Those were our adjacent to Disting, like what surrounding areas maybe would have celebrated. Like we have proof that certain people, like obviously the Anglo-Saxons with their Acerbot, the Germanic tribes with charming of the plough, and we had the English celebrating Plough Monday, and then the Celts celebrating Imbolc. Those are the adjacent ones, and the pre-Christian celebrations that we as modern day pagans have borrowed from to kind of create our own modern interpretations. As I mentioned before, Disting is still celebrated in modern day Sweden. However, it is more of a festival than a religious gathering. Contemporary heathen and pagan communities observe Disting by adding a Acerbot to their spring festivities, often along with other springtime holidays like the aforementioned Charming of the Plough, Acerbot, Imbolc, and likely other traditions. Especially in mixed faith groups like ours, the specific dates for celebrations vary among different groups, especially if you work 9 to 5s. Zach, do you have any ideas on how one would integrate some of the historical elements with modern spiritual practices?
Well, going back to the root words of what Disting and Disir are, is to celebrate the Disir. As I understand, one of the ways that we can celebrate nowadays is by finding a female character in your family or in your life that you can try to channel and bring to your day and honor them.
Yeah, that's great. Next, we're going to talk about solitary practice. We have suggestions for individuals wishing to honor Disting alone. Could you take a guess of what a personal altar for Disting would be?
I would guess a section of your home dedicated for ritual space or giving that mindset to honor who you intend.
Absolutely. As far as celebrating alone, if you are unaware of other pagans in your area or if you just don't have access to them, I think a good way to honor this holiday and do a solo practice would be setting up a personal altar dedicated to the Disir. And this will vary based on what feels right to you with your ancestors and preferences. For me, I have some jewelry of my grandmother that I put out with stones from where she lived. Sometimes I use her scarves as altar cloths, as the base, the foundation in which I build the altar up. And I say sometimes, but I really mean for all altars that I make, I use her scarves because that's something I have of hers. My family were herbalists and healers and dressmakers. It seems appropriate to burn homemade incense with herbs. In the past, what I've done is I had an herb garden and I would make my own incense or little bundles and anoint those with tinctures. And I might also put a small hand sewing kit to represent my family making clothing, because that's something that we've been doing for hundreds of years. That's what I would do to make a Disir altar. And of course with candles, because fire. But that would be my indoor ritual, and I really would like to put that on a bookshelf. I feel like there's a lot of wisdom there, and it makes sense for me to have the wisdom of the gods, the wisdom of the Disir, whoever I change out the altar space for, to be there. And that's just a personal preference, so you can alter that to what feels right for you. Zach, what would you feel is appropriate for your Disir altar?
So the two people I would probably pick are my two grandmothers. They actually are very similar to some of the practices you were talking about. my mother's side, her mom was very huge into quilting. Actually, the quilt on the bed behind you is one she made. So that's the one I have of hers. And my other grandma, she is very into gardening and preparing food, canning and saving for her family and throughout the year.
What if we put our canner that we got for Christmas on the altar to receive blessings
We could.
so that we can learn how to do it better?
So we were talking about setting up an altar space, but also something that I think comes with celebrating and honoring your ancestry. It comes from practice. So one way I would feel comfortable doing that is maybe setting up a space for that, but also doing those things that they love to do. Whether that is me doing a small quilting project or making a pillow or like canning. Like if we actually used our gifts and we honored them and brought their practices to life in our own home to bring their spirit.
I love that. I think that's great because canning, I'm not trying to shout out homesteading or anything, but what that's doing is that doesn't just provide for you in the moment. When you do something like that has to do with food storage, it makes it so that you have something for a rainy day. I know sometimes when I've been broke, my parents' love language is providing. My dad hunts, they can a lot of his meat, they make chili out of venison, and they gifted me some canned bear product, and I don't really know what to do with it. But let me tell you, if I was having a moment where I had no money for groceries, I would make something out of that. You know what I mean? So I think that familial tradition of food storage is really nice because there's so much love in food. You know, we need it, obviously, to survive. But when you're given something like that, like the knowledge of canning, something that seems so mundane, it's important, and it really does help us in the future. So I think that's really cool.
Just to go a little further off topic, an angle that I think is really cool with that also is that we just celebrated Thorablot, right? With our kindred?
Well, no.
No? What was it? It was...
Thorablot was episode 1 where we ate fermented shark, but we did a bloat to Thor at Yule, if that's what you're talking about.
Okay. I am, but I'm also talking about like kind of the last episode, and I'm sure you talked about this, where the part about the bloat was that like you've made it through the solstice, like you are through the tough part and you bring out the best food that you still have from the winter.
Mm-hmm.
I think that also connects with food storage and canning and those kind of practices. Like, you know, we can always go to the store and buy food, but if you make your own food, and by that time of the year, if you're a little low, you can crack that food out. You can use that as kind of a way to relate to the fact that they had to struggle through the winter, and they celebrated anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people are gonna get mad homesteader vibes from us from this conversation.
I mean, it tracks. That's where we're trying to go.
Yeah. For our listeners and for the Asatru community, when Zach and I get out of the military, because we're currently active duty, we have decided that we will be buying land or buying an old rundown farm and making it our own. So I come from farmers, and he told you a little bit about his history. We really feel the pull for that. I can't even remember where we are in the script. I found it.
Cool.
Because I asked you what would feel appropriate for your Disir altar. Yeah. It's just a can of deer chili. There you go. On your Disir altar.
I love your mom's deer chili. It's so good.
It's so good.
Anyways.
It's so good.
Moving on.
Anyway, more ways to celebrate Disting as a solo practitioner. You can read stories or look up YouTube videos based on defeating the Winter King. So that's a popular pagan kind of thing to do. You can also perform rituals or meditations focused on ancestral connections. So one of them, obviously, honoring the Disir. You could do a solo bloat to Freya or any goddess of your choice. You can make a shrine, like what we were saying, like an altar, to your female ancestors. You can journal how you can embrace your divine femininity and be a good ancestor to those who come after you. And I think that's something important that we don't talk about enough, like how to become a good ancestor for the ones after us. Also, This one's a little abstract. You can plow fields in your mind to make space to plant seeds of thought. What I mean by that is you can think on all of your wishes you made for Yule, everything you wanted to do for the new year. This is the lunar new year, right? Not our physical modern day new year. So you can take everything. I feel like the hustle and bustle from the holidays makes it so hard to focus on what our New Year's intentions are. By the time February comes around and you're in our lunar new year, now it's like we've had time to reflect and look inside. What is realistic that I can do that will help me achieve my goals? And so when I say plow the fields of your mind to plant mind seeds, is what do you need to do to achieve your goals that you set out at Yule? Thoughts?
My thoughts, yes. So it kind of seems like all of these holidays we've talked about while we're focusing on Disting, they have a majority where they focus on the Disir, but they're also focusing on the New Year. And while they didn't call it that, that's the start of where the work happens. That's the start of where they prepare themselves for what's coming. Whether that's farming or whether that's we're going off to conquer more land or defend our lands, whatever it may be, that was the time to do it. And while we weren't really talking about charming the plow, one part I do like about that is that you take a piece of your career or a piece of who you are, whether that, like a plow, it's the tool of your work, or sewing machines or your forging equipment, you bless that and you set that apart so that throughout the year you have to think about it. You have to think about that tool that you're using. You ask for blessings upon that tool so that you can accomplish more throughout the year.
It's funny that you say that because that's my next point.
Cool.
Yeah, well, I call that engaging in symbolic acts, like a blessing, not just for gardening tools, because not all of us are gardeners like they were back then. Your tools of work or your tools of the trade. For me, it would be my computer, because I make this podcast, I do other things for tack. My sewing machine, my wood burner, my leather working tools. Zach, do you think of anything else that you would like to be blessed? I'm also asking because we're going to do that with our ritual group here.
Actually, there's several things I would like to bless. I don't know if that's a thing.
Yeah.
Okay. But one of the things that I didn't really talk about, or we didn't talk about, that I would like blessed is a gun. Because we are soldiers, that's part of our trade. But also, a firearm is still a tool. It's a tool of protection and it's a tool of defense.
That makes a lot of sense considering that you're a soldier, especially with having qualifications. We have to qualify on our weapons, so having that blessed so that we get higher scores helps you with promotions, and also just helps you survive if you were ever to be in harm's way in our career. So yeah, do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, to be clear, that's just a me thing. I know there's others who do it, but obviously firearms are kind of a touchy subject. Don't feel that that is needed or expected out of a blessing of your tools.
What are some other tools then that you would want?
I would probably go with perhaps a hammer, because I want to get into blacksmithing. I've been trying. Still have a long ways to go. I tried to make a leaf. It looked more like a flamingo. Perhaps a sewing machine. I know that's a little hard, so I might use a representation like a sewing kit to bring to the celebration to bless. Sewing machines are a little heavy, especially our solid metal vintage ones.
We should probably bless our vintage ones because they're the most problematic at this time.
But there's a plethora of things you can use. And while like this faith is very centered on tradition and it's very centered on history, it doesn't have to at all be focused on that. Like if you are a digital designer,
bless the computer.
Bless the computer or your iPad or laptop, whatever you use, that is your tool.
Yeah.
Whatever you are using to better yourself and further yourself, that's what you should use.
There's plenty of things that you can bless and that you can ask for blessings for. So that kind of wraps up our solo practitioner ideas. I know that was kind of a lot. I'm going to take an intermission and go to the restroom, and then we'll get back to talk about the group celebration.
Goodbye.
Are you saying something?
Say bye.
Entertain yourself.
I will. I should use that voice more.
You haven't cracked out the voice once.
I haven't had an opportunity.
What is happening? Something just started playing on my computer. Haunted. Haunted.
Haunted.
Okay, I'll be right back.
I'm hearing your echo on the mic. It's funny. Get Coyote in the shot.
Yeah. Oh, I have a coyote.
We are fur folk.
Hey, this has nothing to do with the podcast, but I just remembered we need to come up with a battle game for the chili cook-off. And I was thinking about stealing some ideas from Sausage Fest.
Sausage fist.
So basically, we can take all of our leftover brown material and make bean-shaped rocks to throw, and it'll be like chili.
Chewy.
Or we can make
Chilies.
a flail that looks like weenies,
That would be funny. I could do that, yeah.
and that will be that could be a traveling prize.
What's the matter? Scared of beans?
Yeah, except it won't be. Yeah. Bean rocks. It's like we need a chili game. Okay, back to the podcast. We are recording. Okay. All right, moving on to our next section. We have group celebrations. Here are some things you can do with a group. So I know we already went over solo practicing, and a lot of those things you can do with a group. You just have to organize it differently. How I like to run events is I like to do an activity first, then the ritual, and then we feast. So a group activity to start out with can simply be introductions. And sometimes we have new folks in our group, especially because we're associated with the military base and we get a lot of Norse pagan soldiers. They get in touch with me so I can help them feel at home here. But if you wanted, you could also tell stories about female ancestors, and you can kind of do that in a circle so everybody has the chance to talk or pass if they want. If you have an artsy group, you can create art inspired by Disir. You can perform singing or dancing, or you could even practice divination, like rune reading. Whatever you are into, whatever your group does, you can make it Disir oriented. You can make it themed with this celebration. You don't have to have a huge specific Disir thing. You just do something that you guys already enjoy doing. Just make it in honor of the Disir. Any thoughts for that, Zach?
Thank you for asking. So, something that our kindred has done in the past is one of our first floats that we actually participated in together. We each had our own drinks, because passing around a big drink can be, kind of gross. But we each went around in the circle, and the first circle was to pick a god that we wanted to honor.
The gods.
Yes.
You're talking about a symbol.
Sorry.
But yes, our first
symbol
symbol with this kindred, yes.
Yes. So first circle was for the gods, and the second circle we chose an ancestor, family member, friend, anyone that was living or dead that we wanted to honor. I think you can do something very similar and just make it Disir themed. So whether you wanted to choose one of the Disir to honor, or whether one of your female ancestors.
Another one, I know I usually talk about my grandmother during those times. I also have Native American heritage, and I practice certain Native American things to still be with her, to speak with her and learn from her. And it's something that's similar in Seder, which we won't get into much in this episode, but it's a practice I do specifically around Disting because that is our time to honor of the Disir. But that is something else that I think is cool, is to do some history research and learn about where you came from. Find a woman you may or may not be related to that could possibly be your Disir and just research them. Just knowing who they are, there's so many great women in history that we don't necessarily know about just because the history books, they're catered to talk about who won the fight, So
yeah, I think that's a really good idea. Ancestry is a really cool thing to get into. While I haven't done it myself, I know my grandma is very into it, and she has a ton of the paperwork for our lineage going back hundreds and hundreds of years.
Are all grandmas into that? Because I feel like
a lot of them are.
They're like the history recorders, of the family.
Thank goodness, though, or that would be lost.
Yeah.
But I mean, it really can't be anyone, but I do like the idea of finding one of your ancestors and finding their story and their struggles. It brings pride to your lineage, and specifically to your Disir lineage, going along with this holiday. I think also you can bring that into researching the god that you want to honor. So like for Freya, doing your research on her and spending the time to connect with her during that time, and not just honoring her during the celebration, during the ceremony. I guess you can kind of call it on your own thing, but researching them and getting closer to them so that when you get to the group ritual, you have that connection and you can bring that spirit into the group.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Also, just want to say, sometimes when you research your ancestors, you don't always find positive things or things that you want to be proud of. Sometimes you find things that you need to heal generational curses, and that'll be for a different episode.
Yes, but this is focusing on the good, so we're going to stick with that.
You're right. I just wanted to make sure that we said something.
Yeah, history is rarely pretty, but there are good people in it, and it's good to praise the good, let go of the bad. Not let go of it as in forget it, but as a people, as a person, moving forward from that and bringing good into the world.
Beautifully stated. So at the time of this recording, we are currently ironing out the details with our group, the El Paso Heathen Collective. And I think we would bloat to Freya and Air. And I say that because based on what everybody wanted from our Yule celebration, I think both Freya and Air working together with us, or even working separately with us, would really benefit our group. How we modernize things like animal sacrifice is that in our group, what we did at our last celebration is we reserved a plate for the deity of choice. So at Yule, we did our bloat to Thor, and we reserved a plate for him, and we added a little bit of everything that everyone brought. We did potluck style. So that's what we did at Yule, and it worked really well. For Disting, we would do our bloat, and afterwards, we would then have members come forward with a tool, because I kind of like the idea of charming of the Plough. So I'd have our members come bring a tool to be blessed for the upcoming year, and after everything is finished, this is just what I would like to do. We would send the food into the fire to be transported symbolically to the goddesses and then close the ritual. After the ritual is over, it's time to feast. So we invite our gods to stay, but they're not obliged to. And we usually do this, like I said, potluck style. And our group is only roughly 30 people, so if you have a larger group, you may opt to do it differently, but potluck style really works well with our group. Zach, do you have anything to add to that?
So like you were saying about how we celebrated last time by saving a plate of food, I think that's very good because not only is that a substitute for sacrifice, I mean it is a sacrifice, but animal and human sacrifice. As a substitute for that, I think it works very good, especially because there are other sects of paganism that also historically do that. If I'm not mistaken, the Greeks did that, and they specifically saved the best of their food.
Yes, we kind of did that.
They saved the best of their food, and then they threw it into the fire to sacrifice and let it burn and raise to the gods.
Exactly. So that's what we did for Yule, and I like that because it really shows that food costs money and money costs time. We're sacrificing our time to get paid, right? And when we do that, some people might say, oh, you're wasting food. It's just going into the fire. No, we're pagans. It's showing that we did our duties to our gods and that we sacrificed this because it's important to us. Because the whole purpose of the bloat is the gift for gift. And sure, our gods are bigger than us. They are on a different plane of existence than us. But this sacrifice might be small to them, but they're going to give back something that is equally earned to us that we give to them. So it's important.
Yeah, food can be like a small part of our lives. Like while we all enjoy it, at least most of us enjoy it, monetarily, it's not necessarily the biggest part of our lives.
Oh my god, it is though. Haven't you seen that? What is that kids cartoon
where grocery price is going crazy nowadays?
Oh yeah, it's disturbing. But no, you know that cartoon where they talk about the humans, that it's all the little animals and they talk about the humans over the hedge, where he's all like, humans, this is where they put a sacrifice on the table to eat, and this is where they pray for it, and then like they just talk about like all these things, and they go to work so that they can have money so that they can buy food.
What I mean specifically is we don't have to spend all year raising an animal, keeping it clean, making sure it's fed, making sure it's healthy and safe and protected, or plowing the field, planting the seed, waiting for it to get big and strong, and then cutting it down and processing it into our food. We don't have to do all of that.
Right.
So,
like, it's not our entire life, but we have an ease of access in modern day.
comparatively, it's a lot easier for us, but also it's symbolic in the sense that we're giving what we can and we're giving what we have. And for the gods, we're setting apart what we have and what we can today and accommodating for the historical differences.
Absolutely. That was beautifully stated. I already said that earlier.
I was putting in my own words.
You're good with words. Good job. So for larger groups, you may opt to run your event a little bit differently than potluck style. If people pre-register with a dollar amount attached, it could help fund the feast, but that's something we can get into if our listeners are interested. If you're listening and you're interested, send me an email at podcast@theasatrucommunity.com. And if there's a need, I can probably do a whole episode on larger events and how to set them up. Just let me know. I'm waiting for my baby. Do you have any closing thoughts you want to say, Zach, before we end this episode?
I think Disir is Disir and Disting are a very good way to connect yourself with specific ancestors or deities that you might not otherwise connect yourself with. Like, say your patron god is Thor, Odin, or any of the others. It's a good way to branch out into
the goddesses
and to also branch yourself out to your heritage, where you came from, and choosing the pieces that you want to bring forth in your own life and honor. Absolutely. I know it was kind of like stated several times, but as a closing statement, wrap it up. There you go.
I appreciate that. As we wrap up today's episode, I hope this exploration of Disting and a brief overview of adjacent traditions has inspired you to connect to this celebration in your own way. The big takeaway for me is that we've made it through the toughest parts of winter. It's time to ready the fields for the work to come. By honoring the Disir, asking for blessings on our tools of trade, and by spending time with loved ones. Remember, there's no single right way to honor the turning of the seasons or the spirits who walk alongside us. Whether a solitary ritual, a shared feast, or simply taking a moment to reflect on your own roots and intentions for the upcoming season, I encourage you to explore and adapt these practices in ways that resonate with you. Hello, I just wanted to hop on and read my sources for this episode. My sources are thepagangrove.blogspot.com, D is for Disting and other heathen holidays in February, pagankids.org/post/disting, thetroth.org/resource/disting, Jackson Crawford on YouTube, Ocean Keltoi on YouTube, Norse Magic and Beliefs YouTube channel, weirddesigns.wordpress.com, the article Holy Tides of the Northern Tradition, viking-store.com/blog/Norse/disting, a traditional Viking celebration of spring, the symbolism and customs, the Germanic chronicler Adam of Bremen, the Hemskringla. Those are all going to be found within the sources that I just listed. Our music is by hot_dope and NotProd. You can find us at the Asatru Community at www.theasatrucommunity.com. For our charter membership sign up, follow the link in the show notes or head to theasatrucommunity.com and at the top menu, click Become Part of the Community, the drop down, and click on Registration. Thank you for joining us on Fireside Frith. If you have questions, stories, or reflections you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you at podcast@theasatrucommunity.com. Visit the Asatru Community online to connect and contribute. And don't forget to subscribe, share this podcast, and leave a review to help others find us. May your hearth be warm and your path guided by frith and wisdom. Thank you for joining me, and may your path be blessed with growth, wisdom, and connection. Until next time, Skull!
Skull!